Hi, how are you doing? No, really. With everything that is going on, please share in the comments how you're doing and or what you're struggling with these days. I know this is a stressful time, so I want you to know that I'm here for you. It's also important that we're here for each other during this time. I know I'm feeling rather overwhelmed and worried about the future. Maybe you are too. But I try to stay grounded in God's truth that He will get us through this, work all things for good, even if that means I get sick sometime soon. To pass the time, I've been spending a little more time in some of the Facebook groups that I'm a part of. In one of the personality disorders groups, someone asked about splitting and what that looks like. After I described this black and white thinking, I thought this would make a great video as well. I'm sure because of the stress that's going on in the world, there's a lot of people, a lot of personality disorders who are splitting right now. Before I share that information today, let me introduce myself. Hi, I'm Jen Grice, author of the book You Can Survive Divorce. I'm a divorce mentor and empowerment coach guiding women to surviving and thriving after divorce. You can find out more about my ministry, my coaching, my book, and everything else at jengrice.com. So to help us understand splitting better, Psychology Today describes splitting or black and white thinking or all or nothing thinking as self-deception of the ego. It's polarized thoughts of beliefs, objects, actions, or persons, meaning there's no gray area in any of these areas of life. So a belief, object, action, or person is either all good or all bad. There's no room for good and bad attributes. It's either one way or the other. For example, I'm sure your ex-husband or even other toxic family members is not all bad in your mind. They may have done toxic things like lying, cheating, gossiping, stealing from you, smear campaign, other things that you just couldn't put up with anymore. So you separated for your emotional health, but you don't see them as a bad person or all bad. You remember their good qualities. You remember how charming or funny they were. You may even miss that. That's why so many people mourn after they divorce a narcissist, because there was good qualities in this person that you do miss. That's because all people can have good and bad qualities. You have to just decide when the bad outweighs the good enough to say, you know what, I deserve better than this. But you don't think of them as all bad. You think of them as having bad attributes, bad character qualities that you just couldn't put up with. But for the person with narcissistic or borderline personality disorder, they cannot mix the good with the bad. They just can't see any gray area or middle ground, especially with people. They can't see nuances or complexities in people or situations. They can only see one end of the spectrum or the other, black or white, never gray areas. So that just means that a person in a narcissist or borderline personality disorder life is either all good or all bad. This also means if you've done something to offend or even just stand up for yourself, even a perceived slight against that person is viewed as that person is bad. So even if you didn't mean to say something a certain way, or you didn't mean it a certain way, but they took it a certain way, then you could be all bad. A lot of times it's how dare you tell the truth, how dare you say no, how dare you do anything for yourself because that makes you completely selfish, 100%, when it's really just self-care because you have to take care of yourself. To a narcissist or somebody with borderline personality disorder, they just don't understand that your job is to take care of them, and if you do anything else, you're selfish. Again, black and white thinking. They also can't see themselves as being all bad or all wrong, so you have to be. They're not selfish, so you are. It's also important to note that, because I talk about divorce and divorce situations and healing after divorce, the child of of a divorce often get sucked into that black and white thinking as well, and they have to pick a side, the good side, and they shun the perceived bad parent side. It's usually them reading the entire situation wrong, or the other parent trying to ruin any relationship that you have with your children. Or worse yet, the parent with the money who can buy love is the better parent in the child's mind, because they're not the one punishing or taking things away. They're just buying love, buying gifts, buying attention, buying trips. So that bought love is more important and better to the child than genuine love while they're still growing up and learning the difference between the two. So they'll often connect with the toxic parent and ignore the loving parent. And I know I talk about that on my blog, jengrice.com, and in other videos as well. And as I stated earlier, this is a self-deception of their ego, because in their minds, they are the victim on that end of the spectrum that is all good. Think about a time when the narcissist or borderline personality disordered person did something wrong. What was their response? I'm all bad, I can't do anything right, I'm stupid, and on and on. So their dialogue is they are now on that end of the spectrum of all bad. And you, as a caretaking, loving person, might say, oh, that's not true, you're a good person, you just made a wrong choice. And soon they start to internalize that dialogue again, and then they go back to the other end of the spectrum that they are all good, and maybe even cause a fight to somehow blame you to make themselves feel better. So now you walk away from the conversation and feel like you're all bad. Everything that happened was their fault, especially when it comes to cheating. And they're not all bad, but you're all bad. You know, people often ask me, why did he blame me for his cheating? Why did he blame me for catching him? They often defend themselves and say, you know, Jen, I wasn't snooping. That dialogue comes from him. That dialogue that you were snooping and you were doing something wrong that you feel you have to defend yourself comes from him in his black and white thinking, his blaming and projection to say, you were the one in the wrong for looking when you knew in your heart that he was cheating, and you just needed validation that it was going on. So you looked on his phone, on the internet, wherever you had to look. Nothing wrong with that. And you find that he is really cheating. And then you get blamed for looking, or for him cheating. Well, if he'd got more sex or whatever, then he wouldn't cheat. He's not the bad guy. He's not the enemy. So he has to project those feelings onto somebody else, and you just happen to be right there. So that's who he blames. Why? Because his ego has to protect itself. He has to have a reason for his lying, cheating, and or abusing. I'm sure I've shared this before on either my blog or in emails or here on YouTube, but I've had several mothers email me to tell me how bad their son had it in his marriage before he cheated. Now listen to that for just a second. He is the victim, according to this mother. That's why he cheated. Where does that dialogue come from? Protecting the ego, self-deception. And the mother falls for herself as well and believes that poor, cheater husband, and which is not true. She'll often tell me, how dare I tell her daughter-in-law that she's being abused because he was cheating, that her son is not an abuser, that he, in fact, is the victim here. Again, it all goes back to the same stuff. And I always think, that's why your son is the way he is. Congratulations, you've raised a guy to blame others for his problems. You've raised him to protect his and his family image and the ego that they need, to not see where he could do better in his own life, where he could say, instead of cheating, I'm going to talk to my wife in a calm and kind way to say, hey, honey, this is what's going on in our marriage and I'm not happy. A emotionally healthy person doesn't just run out and cheat. I feel like saying you've taught your child to look good, not to be a good person. And I do feel sorry for her, and I delete the messages and move on and continue to tell wives everywhere that if your husband is cheating, that he's an abuser and he's not emotionally healthy, he's toxic, and you need to get away from him for your own sanity. His black and white thinking, his protecting his ego, looking to blame other people, blame his wife for not keeping a clean house, for these are the things that the mothers would say to me. She didn't keep a clean house, or she didn't offer sex, and she didn't this, and she didn't that. Bottom line, he cheated. That's his fault. If she wasn't a good housekeeper, then figure it out. If she didn't cook good meals, then you figure it out. If she didn't give sex, then you figure it out. You don't go cheat on your spouse. You don't blame them for your problems. And as a mother of 3 young adults, I know how hard it is, especially in this narcissistic world. But we need to hold people accountable and tell them to stop blaming everyone else, including their parents, for their problems. It's time that they all grow up and take responsibility for their problems, not saying the world's all good or all bad, or to blame all others for their problems. As a Christian, I know there's bad and evil in this world, but there's also good as well. And we as Christians need to be the good, be good people. Good people aren't perfect. One imperfect person could have both good and bad character qualities. I'm sure I have many bad character qualities, as well as all my good character qualities. It's not black and white. I'm not all good or all bad. I have faults and I know what they are, but I also have a good heart that gets hurt easily, that I need to protect from toxic people of the world, especially the ones that want to call me all bad just because I can bring up the things that I know I've done wrong in my life. And even if they see me all bad, I can let them just think that about me if that's what they choose to do. One of my favorite verses is Exodus 14:14. God will fight for you. You only have to be still. And that's when I remember all the time, anytime I'm viewed as all bad for having boundaries, for caring about myself, and doing what's best for myself, especially during this tough time. So I hope I encouraged you and empowered you today that a narcissist will see you as all good or all bad. One end or the other. You're their friend or their enemy. I bet it's easier if they just see you as all bad at this point so that you can stay away from them, as hard as it is. I know they have good qualities that you miss, but it's not worth drinking the poison just because you're thirsty. You have to stop somewhere. You have to say, I'm not going to pretend to be their friend. I'm not going to be fake. I'm not going to be a doormat when they're just using you for what you can give to them. Once you're used up, you will be discarded. So take care of yourself. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or if you want to share your story. Be sure to subscribe, and I hope to see you in the next video. God bless.